Welcome back. Another episode of RX Radio. Chad Wesley Smith, legend. Unbelievable to be able to pick his brain about things that aren't strength training. Such a wealth of knowledge outside of how to squat, how to bench, how to deadlift. And it blows my mind when people get the chance to talk to him and they corner him about stuff like that. Chad is one of the pioneers of spreading, progressive information about resistance training. If you grew up, if you grew up training and begun your training career without the internet, which I did, and then found the internet and sort of the boilerplate starter pack of info, a couple of forums and a couple of websites, and to watch the evolution and watching Juggernaut sort of springboard modern day Mount Rushmores of educators and athletes. Chad Wesley Smith's kind of in the center of the strength training universe, and I don't think many people appreciate it. So huge shout out to Chad for being that guy. And we talk a lot about his transitions from conventional athletics and throwing into strength sports, his brief, albeit ridiculously successful run as a strongman athlete, powerlifter, and then into business owner and BJJ aficionado, let's say, and coach during all of that. So super interesting conversation. Super grateful to have Chad on. Thanks so much for your time, man. I really appreciate what you do and how you do it. Guy just kind of just goes, okay, I'm best at this now. I'm going to go do something else. Also, thanks to anyone watching on YouTube for we're good. Big things coming. So the new studio setup hopefully is going to be within striking distance here in the next couple of weeks. You might notice a change of scenery. This will be sort of the new home base for me. Working on a few lighting situations. I had to figure out what an f-stop was earlier today. And by the looks of it, I did not figure it out. So appreciate your patience with that. When you hear this, i.e. Wednesday, the 7th, it'll be 5 days to the beginning of Prescript Level 1. If you were thinking about joining this semester, 2 points of information you might find interesting. This will be the last time we offer the course at its current rate in 2025. Like your rent, like milk and eggs, it's going up. Won't be a lot, just kind of keep up the times, keep the lights on. But if you do want to get in at a lesser rate, now is the time to join the Prescript Level 1 coaching certification course that starts late January. 16 weeks applied biomechanics, functional anatomy taught by moi, and the best coaches on the planet. When you get through that, L2 will start in the new year. For those pre-existing L1 coaches looking to get into L2, invites will be sent out. Class does start in a month, so do be sure to keep an eye out for an email. If you haven't received an email about L2 and you want to secure a seat for next semester and you take an L1, shoot me an email, or better, shoot Prescript an email, info@pre-script.com. So L1 last time offered at this price. Oh, and you get a discount if you go register online now for a waiting list. info@pre-script.com. You guys are going to get early registration and you're going to get a cheaper early registration. So not only do you save by not having to pay the 2025 price, you also get to get a discount for being on the opt-in list early. So head on over to www.pre-script.com. PSL1 right there at the top of the red, click that red button, and you're going to be off to the races. You'll get that email on the 12th of August, and then we will start class in September. So without any further ado, Chad Wesley Smith, Juggernaut Training Systems, Juggernaut AI, and just a hell of a human being. Huge thanks again to Chad for everything that he does and continue to do for strength sports, coaching, the integration of tech and training, just again, the center of the universe, and I think you should get more credit for being so. So hope you enjoy, guys. If you need anything from us, feel free to reach out at RX Radio, at pre_script on IG, and at the_muscle_talk, myself on Instagram as well. So feel free to enjoy the episode. We'll talk to you guys next week.
You're tuned in to RX Radio.
I'll do all the intro stuff after, so you can't refute any of it. So you can't be like humble or anything like that. So I'm just gonna just read through the rap sheet as a man who quite literally needs no introduction. And I'm assuming you're living off of the royalties from OpenAI, as Juggernaut AI obviously was out far before and was really spearheading the initiative in the AI world.
We did have a bit of a head start on them. Whenever I mention it, people are like, "Oh, that's it's so great jumping on the AI wave," and I was like, "Oh." They're kind of jumping on our wave, but that OpenAI CEO and I, we haven't been in contact. He hasn't returned my texts, but
I think Sam Altman owes at least a debt of gratitude to the people there at Juggernaut.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Uh, there's a theme I want to talk to you specifically about that I feel is like, coming out of the powerlifting industry, you're probably, and maybe just outside of that, transitions might be the theme or the title of the entire episode. When I think about Juggernaut in its inception, your background as an athlete prior to getting into powerlifting and what you've been able to do during and since, a word that keeps coming up is transition. You've found an ability to transition successfully into everything seemingly that you've done. Could you give like a little bit of a background for those who don't know the legacy of Chad Wesley Smith, sort of like just high level of how you've transitioned and what you've transitioned from and to? And I'd like to kind of dig in because, we interacted during the powerlifting phase of your life, if you will, season of your life. I'm not sure how you look back on that. But you transitioned in from something and out to something else in a way that I don't think I've ever seen anyone else do. So if you could just kind of give like a brief overview of like the Chad Wesley Smith story, and then we can start like diving in.
Yeah. So as an athlete, I went from college track and field athlete throwing the shot put, and then 1 year as a post collegiate. So through 20 meters with the 7.26 kilo shot put. That's about 65 feet, 7 inches. Did my last track meet in the summer of 2010. And then my first powerlifting meet in October of 2010. And that transition, looping it back in there, came about for a couple of reasons. One, I had started Juggernaut in the fall of 2009. So unlike other Olympic hopeful shot putters who, had very part-time jobs or maybe just shot putting all the time, I was working about 70 hours a week, coaching athletes of all kinds, trying to pay the bills and keep the lights on at our first gym. So that made it tough. And then my longtime coach, a guy who coached me through high school and college, Len Blutrick, passed away from cancer shortly after I graduated college. So I was without a coach and without much extra time to dedicate to my training there. So I figured, hey, I'm already strong, so I can just train half as much. I can do all the lifting that I was doing before, and now none of the shot putting. And I was sponsored at the time by Elite FTS as a shot putter, which was a pretty rare thing for them. But I was certainly aware of powerlifting from that, though not very well informed. My first powerlifting meet I did in October 2010 was the first ever USPA meet. They had just transitioned from the USPF and broke off that. Not to date myself here.
Jesus Christ, dog.
Yeah. And it was also the first powerlifting meet I'd ever been to. So I kind of just showed up and was like, well, it's lifting weights. How hard could it be to figure out? And it's not that hard to figure out. I think people get overwhelmed by that idea. And it's like, you write some numbers on a paper, and then you go and lift them. So powerlifting there, 2010, just all powerlifting, 2010, 2011 into 2012. In 2012, I was sort of like a bit burned out, bored of powerlifting, very busy at the gym. So thought, okay, I'm stepping back from competition. I'm not gonna compete. Maybe I'm never gonna compete again. Who knows? And then that goes on for a couple months, and I'm just sort of training to train. And I see an ad for California's Strongest Man, and it's here in Huntington Beach, 5 miles from where I live, and it was in 6 days. And I contacted the promoter. I was like, "Can I still enter this?" And they let me enter, and I did it. And it was some of the worst weather I've ever experienced in Southern California. On St. Patrick's Day, in a parking lot right on the beach in Huntington, like low 50 degrees, pouring rain, super, super windy. So they actually had to cancel like 2 of the events, but I did it. I think I got 3rd or 4th, and it was fun. I did keg toss and all that stuff, and I hadn't trained for any of it. I just showed up pretty much. So then I was like, all right, strongman, let's do it. Did a Giants Live qualifier a month later, and then about 6 months later, 6 months after my first contest, won nationals and won my pro card as a pro strongman and all the glory and riches that come along with professional level strength athletics. So that was late 2012. And then into the first half of 2013, I was like, all right, strongman contest, powerlifting meet, strongman contest, powerlifting meet. 4 in the first, 2 of each in the first 5 months of 2013. And then, wow, I herniated a bunch of discs, shockingly. So after that, I figured, as I rehabbed everything, I figured powerlifting's a little bit more controllable. I'm not 6'7" and 400 pounds, so maybe I can't take strongman quite as far. So I went back to just powerlifting, 2014 through 16, and did the best powerlifting of my life in that time. And from the surgery or from the back injury standpoint, no surgery, nothing, just rehab for L5, S1, L4, L5, the standard everyone's got. But so I totaled 2325, 1,055 kilos there. And then kind of the whole time I'd been doing powerlifting, maybe the second half of my powerlifting career, I was always like, this is probably the last meet. Next one's the last one. Next one's the last one. So I had about 5 last meets in my mind. But from early on in powerlifting, when I did my first or second meet, like 23, 24 years old, I knew I wanted to be out at 30 with no surgery scars. Particularly because when I got into powerlifting and with Elite FTS, I was around almost all equipped powerlifters, multiply powerlifters. Raw was very new. It was me, Stan Efferding, young Eric Lillibridge, like 17-year-old Eric Lillibridge, Robert Wilkerson, first guy to squat 1,000 pounds. But I'd be doing these multiply powerlifting meets as a raw lifter, in the glamorous destinations like Knoxville, Tennessee, and a Days Inn ballroom that just had gotten a bunch of water damage to it. But it's fun. It was fun times. But so I see these multiply powerlifters, Vance Westside guys and Big Iron, and everyone's bodies are fucked up, So I had it in my head the whole time, out at 30, no surgery scars. So I did Big Dogs meet in Australia, the first one. You were probably out there, or I know we've crossed paths in Australia on a few occasions.
Yeah.
So that was shortly after my 30th birthday, and I was like, this is a good place to call it. I don't know if I'm have the will or desire to do the things needed to take it to that absolute next level. And 2016 in my mind isn't very long ago, but now I think I'm coming up on 8 years since my last powerlifting meet, and the numbers that people lift now are unbelievable. And I think my 970 squat, 2325 total, it still holds up decent. It's not what it was then, but I just knew that for me, I enjoyed powerlifting, the sport of powerlifting, but it was never anything more to me than lifting weights and seeing how strong I could get at it. I wasn't willing to make longer term, I think, health sacrifices with it. So I was kind of like, I'm good with that. I'm just going to coach, work on the business. So after about a year of that and just kind of getting bored with training to train, since I hadn't just trained for the sake of training since I was, I don't know, 14, maybe earlier. I mean, my mom has a story about when I was going to play like youth football, tackle football for the first time when I was maybe 9 or 10, that I found all the bungee cords, like that you'd tie stuff down in the back of a truck with. Found all of them I could in our garage, and was bungee cording myself to the tree in our backyard to run band resisted sprints at 9. So maybe I'd never trained to just train. It was always very purposeful. And so after about a year post powerlifting of kind of just getting bored with the lack of motivation, lack of direction, I figured, hey, how about Jiu-Jitsu? Because some of my earliest clients at Juggernaut in 2009, when we first opened up, literally off of a cold call, was this big black belt named Fabio Vilela, Giganchino. And through Fabio, who had pretty recently moved from Brazil, I got to do strength and conditioning for tons and tons of very high-level jiu-jitsu guys. For those in the jiu-jitsu community, like Felipe Pena, I started training him when he was a purple belt, and now one of the greatest jiu-jitsu players, jiu-jitseros of all time. Romulo Barral, Otavio Souza, all these guys, and they're all hey, Coach Chad, when you gonna train? You gotta smash everybody. Come on! And this is back in 2010, and I was like, I can't do it. I gotta stay healthy to lift. I can't get my shoulder, my wrist, or elbow messed up. But then it kind of struck me. I was like, what else could I do? What could I do that's going to be fun and motivating? And I was like, Jiu-Jitsu guys. I hadn't talked to some of them in a couple of years. So head over there to Gracie Baja Irvine, reconnect with my former client to become his student, Professor Philippe De La Monica. So I did Jiu-Jitsu hobbyist early, and then I was like, fuck, I got to compete because that's just how I'm wired. So competed quite a bit, mostly at blue belt and a purple belt now. A couple surgeries since now. Post powerlifting, I've had several surgeries, but now just kind of an all around hobbyist of jiu-jitsu, lifting, golfing. I don't think I'm going to excel at that last one. So
I hope not. I'd be so mad if you like somehow just John Daly'd it. Like, oh yeah, I'm actually really good. Like the strong man walked in off the street 5 days. I'm assuming you were wearing Sperry's. That was one of the things that really I'm like, this guy's beating me in boat shoes by like 600 pounds. It was like
so
the most frustrating thing.
The boat shoes started totally accidentally because I would use like ballet slippers. This is before you could buy something like those notorious lift like deadlift slippers. That didn't exist. You had to go to this ballet supply store online. I wear size 14, so I'm trying to find size 14 ballet slippers because you had to have a sole on them. So I wanted something as close to a sock as possible. And then I'm at a meet at Super Training, and I'm looking through my backpack, and I can't find one of them. So I was like, all right, I got Romaleos and I got Sperry's. So I guess I'm going to deadlift in the Sperry's and pulled a PR. And I was like, oh, this is easy. I'm already wearing them. So now I don't even have to bring any extra shoes.
Did you at any point when you came out of your throwing career, because I know it's something athletes that I've talked with, athletes that I've been close to, as they get out of like conventional sport and competition, they kind of run into like a bit of an identity crisis. I've heard that story of like, I've never not competed, but I usually hear it with like, I went through like a really dark time. I stopped, the Olympics were over. I got injured, or I was like forced out by age or whatever. Has there ever been an issue when you kind of seem to just go like, well, I'm done here, and then you just like walk away? Was it difficult at all going from like throwing into powerlifting where, we don't have an Olympics, so there's not really like an organized national scene? Like, was that a difficult transition for you?
It was not. And I do know that that is a tough thing, and that we have a girl on our team now, Dr. Kate Cohen, and she has a PhD in sports psychology, and that's her main area of study, is this struggle with retirement for athletes. For track, I had been throwing the shot put from when I was 8 years old till 20, just before I turned 24. So 8 to 23. But, I had a very, very brief time of like, maybe I'd go back and do it again. But yeah, I'd moved on to the next thing. I don't feel that my identity, for myself, other people may perceive it to be, but that my identity was not tied to being a powerlifter or, even being the big, strong guy. My life here, in Orange County where I grew up is not, lifting centric, like at all. Marissa and I, of course, lift. Pretty much none of our friends that we interact with on the day-to-day basis are competitive athletes or powerlifters or anything like that. Some of them lift very, very recreationally for their health, but they're just kind of like, that's what we do. They're lawyers and mortgage brokers and nurses and whatever. And, so I've never found it to be, I was never tied to it in that way. And I think that's probably been a healthy thing for me.
Yeah, the no surgery goal going into it is pretty unique. I think most people have higher, although you could argue that be the highest aspiration, being healthy and shit. But like, most people really want to win that blue participation trophy and the Jimmy John's lunch ticket or whatever the hell you got somewhere in the Midwest. Now, I mean, I'm selfishly curious. We off the jump, we kind of made a quip about Juggernaut AI. The business transition and something that maybe wasn't even a transition. It always seemed like it was sort of, at various degrees in the background throughout the entirety, and even still. What was your background in business? How did Juggernaut come to be sort of like this namesake juggernaut in the industry? What's that process been like? Because not only, what you've had to go through in developing your business over time, but just how business in our industry has evolved over the time since the inception of Juggernaut.
Yeah. So, I graduated college in May 2009 with a degree in history. I had originally planned to be a high school teacher and head high school football coach and track coach. I'd gotten offered a track coaching job at the University of California, Berkeley, where I attended school for 2 years to coach their throwers. And I was going to take that and wanted to take that and continue training and try to go to the 2012 Olympics. And then I, really thought man, these assistant track coaches don't get paid shit. And the Bay Area is super expensive. And I'm still going to have to train. So I'm probably going to need another job. I'm going to have to be like a bouncer or something at night. So I ended up passing on that and connecting with a physical therapist who I'd worked with some down here about opening a sport performance gym, because I felt like there was a need for that in Orange County where I grew up, that every place was kind of like the velocity, these big, shiny speed, agility, quickness centers that kind of just running like a mill through. And I was all about Joe DeFranco. And I was like, no, we're going to make a fucking hardcore warehouse gym and bands and chains. Fuck yeah. So I was like, let's open that. And even though the really intense part, anyone who knows me, that's not me at all. But so we opened that. And certainly in 2009, if you would have said, in 15 years, you guys are going to be a software company, you're going to do a mobile app, I'd be like, what does that even mean? It would have been impossible to conceive of as that at that point. I think we had iPhone 3s, and it was like, oh, there's an app for that. Never thought there's an app for that. For powerlifting coaching. So it was all sport performance coaching, and then a year into that, I wrote the Juggernaut Method ebook, which at the time was like, oh my God, this guy's writing an ebook. This is cutting edge. It was like 531 and Juggernaut Method. Those were like the ones that were out there. So, starting strength stuff as well, but we were very early in that, and then I just started writing more and writing more and writing more. So, and then kind of became the guy who the other powerlifters were like, well, Chad knows how to do this. He can help us do our own ebook. So Cube Method, and helping Brandon Lilly and getting guys like Dan Green writing articles, and probably the first internet published article of the famous Dr. Mike Israetel and people like that were all Juggernaut ones. And we were, the sort of counter voice to the equipped powerlifting and Westside world. So grew through that and just kind of, for myself and Juggernaut, particularly as our brand online grew, which was always just about education. It was always about providing people with the most valuable information possible to help them reach their goals as athletes or coaches. And, we had different iterations of subscription sites and paywall and this and premium content and this and that. And we had a full custom subscription site called Strong 360. And we were doing, this is in 2013, maybe 14. We're doing podcasts on that, and would put out this premium content every month. And then I started posting training on there, that people could subscribe to the training on there. And that became by far the most popular part. And I wrote it as there's a beginner template, or beginner, intermediate, and advanced program. And it was just periodized differently. Basically, the frequency was a bit different within it, but it was my first real attempts at individualization, like true individualization on a mass scale. Because things like the Juggernaut Method or 531 or any other program that has a name on it, and you can download it on a PDF, it's fixed. If you get it and I get it, it's the same thing. And that might not be too far off, but when someone who's been lifting for 6 months gets it, it's the same thing for them. And when a 120-pound, 22-year-old girl gets it, it's the same for her. Or a 65-year-old guy gets it, it's the same for him. And that's not how it should be. So as I started posting this Strong 360 programming and making some attempts of like, all right, we're going to make this a affordable monthly subscription, bring to the masses, so at least we can go beginner, intermediate, advanced. And then it was like, all right, well, what if we go lightweight, middleweights, heavyweights? What if we go male and female? What if we go, these high level changes that make a big difference for people, especially as you start stacking them on top of each other. And then working with Dr. Mike and talking, MEV, MRV, all that stuff, and speaking at seminars and having to explain, all right, why is this person's MRV higher or lower than that person's? What are the simple things that we can observe as coaches to help us understand how much volume a specific athlete likely is going to be able to recover from? Because I would get up there and talk like kind of MRV theory. This makes it go up, this makes it go down, and talk for 2 hours, whatever, about program design at these seminars I'd do all over. And then at the end, they're like, "But what's my number? Tell me my MEV and MRV." So at some point, I was like, "All right, fuck, I'm just going to make like a little system to create these scores, like where you can put in your information, gender, age, height, weight, strength, experience." And just kept adding to that. Okay, what else do we consider as coaches? All right, how much stress does this person under from their regular lifestyle? How long have they been training? Some just, what have they responded to best in the past? And just kind of created this system to spit out MEV and MRV best estimates for people. And then once I had those numbers, I was like, well, the relationship of these numbers is also determinant of how I would periodize for this person. They'd get more hypertrophy and less peaking because of this. This person would get longer peaking, more general strength. It's also informative to what their frequency should be. And as we kind of stack those on top of each other, it's like, well, this creates a program for someone, and there's Juggernaut AI.
Yeah, except no, right? Because you're not a software developer. Like my big curiosity is like, I've worked with development teams of various capacities, and I always feel like I'm at the mechanic. Like, I don't know how cars work. I know where the key goes and I know where the gas goes. Anything shy of that, I need a real man to tell me what to do. What is the experience of, you write all of these what if statements, and then it creates this now with where like back, carving this stuff into the side of a cave in 2012 to like an actual application software company. What was like that personal transition of like, I'm assuming if you tell me too that you also like are like fluent in Python and shit, I'm literally leaving the call.
Yeah.
Like, it's like,
no, far from it. So that worked out about as fortuitously as it could through a gentleman named Tim Arnold, who's the CTO of Juggernaut AI. And he had been a subscriber to like our club kind of email-based coaching stuff, and then had become a one-on-one client of Marissa's. And he was a web developer. So he designed a new website for Marissa. And then I was like, hey, we need to do some of the Juggernaut one as well. And she's like, I have this online client who did mine, and he could help you too. So probably in 2017, Tim redesigned our website, and then he was kind of just like an avid Juggernaut fan and consumer of this information. So he was seeing more and more and more of this stuff get put out about individualization and this system of like, all right, we're going to add this many sets if you're a female, we're going to take this many away if you're tall, and so on and so forth. So he was like, I can make this into an app. I was like, well, have you ever made an app before? I said, no. Oh, fuck it, let's do it.
So, great answer. Great.
Yeah. So Tim wrote every line of code in the originally released Juggernaut AI app that came out in December 2020. And now we have Tim plus four more full time developers working on it, and he's I give him training stuff that I understand, and he turns it into what comes out on the app.
Is
So
from a business owner perspective, that type of control, and this is turning into a personal therapy session for me, so thank you. That type of control, like turning it over to something you don't understand, and now identifying your company as a software company, as a man who knows not how to write. I don't know. You probably know how to write some code. I wouldn't be surprised. Not a single lick. Not, I was just trying to give you the benefit of the doubt. I don't know how. Like the computer's like the car to me, and like how have you dealt with that as far as like from a business owner who's established sort of like one of the, I don't know, the bastions of education? Like you just named off a current Mount Rushmore of people in the industry that have all sort of came up and incubated in the Juggernaut system. What was that process like? Of like, it has to somewhat have been an all eggs in the basket type of decision of like, okay, we need to move the company this direction, but it's a direction that I don't know how to hold a lantern for.
yeah, I mean, so before that, we had the spreadsheet based system that was doing it. So that was enough proof of concept to be like, all right, the app is where it needs to go. And Tim just it was so seamless. There had been a couple other forays into like, can this company do it? Can that company do it? But they had no idea what it really was. They didn't know what the fuck powerlifting was. So it was like, I was speaking a language that they didn't understand. They were speaking a language that I didn't understand. And there was nothing to translate it in between. But Tim understood the language that I was speaking. So it actually became not that complicated on his side of things. Um, I mean, I say not too complicated. I don't want to discredit what he's doing. Yeah. But there's always things that like I think are going to be simple because they seem simple on my side of things, and then things that I think are going to be complicated, and it's like the inverse for them in the actual coding standpoint. But like one of our other developers, Kyle Wilcox, was a USA bobsled athlete that I was doing online coaching for like 3 or 4 years as he was trying to make the 2022 Olympic team. And he was, just happened to be that he was like a freelance coder for, worked for Apple a bunch while he's training for bobsled. And I was like, hey, when you're done bobsledding, you should just do it for us. Oh, perfect. And you know exactly how I write programs because you've been doing them for the last 4 years. So yeah, just kind of, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
That's or to be both in your case. That sounds.
Yeah.
I just can't wait for like Chad's book to come out about like when you get into life coaching, like everyone in the fitness industry seems to do. Like just like it'll work out. The end. Chad Wesley Smith. It's funny you talk about things that seem simple and are actually difficult. I learned this the other day that OpenAI and ChatGPT 4.0 or whatever, if you ask it the question, how many R's in the word renderer, it can't give you an answer.
Huh.
How I immediately was like, okay, we're good. We got at least another 5 years before the robots take over. I feel like that's the new Turing test. It's like, how many R's in renderer? I'm not asking you personally how many R's.
Yeah. I'm like doubting myself now. 3. I mean, it seems like
I don't
3.
know. You can ask it to write a coding program that will tell you, and it can do that. Write me a program that tells me how many R's are in the word render. It can do that, but it can't actually tell you. And it's like, that's when I was like, I thought about taking a CS course when we started working with our backend developer. I'm like, I want to speak this guy's language. I want to not feel dumb in the meeting. And I watched like one of this like Harvard CS online course. And I was like, no, I'm just going to feel dumb in the meetings. I'm out the game. Tap it out.
Yeah. I mean, I've been extremely fortunate to have someone as trustworthy and hardworking as Tim has been throughout this entire process, that we've been working together for going on 7 years now. Yeah, so it's been really great, and none of this stuff could have happened without him.
No, the next transition that really interests me and is when you got into jiu-jitsu. I don't know. You probably remember some of the photos that you would post out of the tournaments that you competed at were some of like they should have been like banned by Instagram. Like I would literally make jokes to people in the powerlifting community. It's like that looks like someone broke into Chad's house and he fucked them up in the bathrobe. Like you just kind of look like upset, but there's like I said, dead guy with like a broken arm, and you're just like, you're like walking like it's like you're going back up the stairs after you just killed an intruder. What was
I was
that?
probably just upset about how out of breath I was.
What was that first competition like, or even your first role? Like you come out like dog. What was your biggest during powerlifting, body weight?
Oh, 370.
Health. What
Yeah.
like the experience of that I couldn't fathom, but taking
So
that or something.
I was really out of shape when I started jiu-jitsu. Like I'd been training for like about 10 months post powerlifting at that point, but not training hard. So I wasn't even that strong by my own, standards, skewed perspective, and hadn't been doing cardio or anything for shit. So my plan of like, I'm going to stop powerlifting for health. I wasn't doing a really good job of that. But so I started jiu-jitsu, fundamentals class and huffing and puffing like crazy through the warm up. But my first tournament I did would have been about February 2017. So I started jiu-jitsu in September 2016. So whatever that is, 6 months later. And it's just a intro Gracie Baja tournament because there's hundreds and hundreds of Gracie Bajas like in California. So a bunch of Gracie Bajas get together, tournament going on. There's only 3 guys, me plus 2 others in my bracket. So like, okay, we'll do like a little round robin here. I'm ultra heavyweight is the class for jiu-jitsu. Ultra heavyweight, super heavyweight's below that, then heavyweight. So there's a super heavyweight guy, which is like he's like 220, and another ultra heavyweight. The super heavyweight guy, his name is Zach. He comes up to me in the back and he's like, man, he's like, I watch your YouTube videos. Like, that's so awesome you're doing jiu-jitsu. And my first thought is like, I better beat that guy. Like otherwise he's going to be like, this guy's talking about how to be strong. I just whooped his ass.
He's going to unsubscribe. So, he's going to unsubscribe for the channel.
Yeah. And so my first match is against another guy, and I end up losing by advantage. And in the round robin situation, advantage is like a half a point. It's like a tiebreaker, basically. It's like you almost got this point, but not quite. But in case that's all that happens, this is what will decide it. So I lose the first match on advantage, and then I have 5 minutes to rest, which for a fat, out of shape ultra heavyweight who had just done his first competitive, jiu-jitsu match ever, I'm fucking dying. Still huffing and puffing, my forearms cramped, like so pumped from the grips. So then 5 minutes later, I got to go against Zach. And I know in it, I was like, all right, I'm going to try and shoot like a blast double right off the bat. And if I don't get it, I'm fucked because I'm so tired. And I didn't get it, so I was fucked. And he beats me. So I'm 0-2. He submits me. So I lose both my matches first jiu-jitsu tournament. And this tournament, it had all these Gracie Baja guys there, all the professors, who I had been their strength and conditioning coach for, I'd known some of them for like 8 years at that point. And they're like, hey, Coach Chad, let's go today. It's going to be a great day. And then I fucking lose in front of all of them twice. And like walking back to my car, this little tournament that's at like in a high school gymnasium, all my shit is cramping up. Like I'm so fucking tired from these 9 minutes of, real competitive jiu-jitsu. Just thinking like, what the fuck am I doing? Like I've been like world class in 3 different sports, and I'm 0-2 in fucking white belt jiu-jitsu. So huge bummer there, but I got better since then. Got to improve, trained a lot harder, lost a bunch of weight. Not particularly right now. I'm not 370, but not in my best shape I've ever been. Um, but yeah, jiu-jitsu is an endlessly humbling, interesting journey, because like the technique, once you can squat, bench, and deadlift, like you can squat, bench, and deadlift. Maybe there's, these fractional refinements that you can make. Jiu-jitsu technique is just a never-ending web, and then the opponent changes, so it all changes, and then the opponent changes again, so it all changes again. So like, we're very fortunate. I train at the North American headquarters for Gracie Baja, so we have very high-level professors and tons of visitors all the time. Like Buchecha was there last week, and they're naming Gracie as a guy I coach for strength and conditioning for MMA. The guys who have been doing jiu-jitsu like since they were born, and they're still innovating and talking shop with each other and getting these new little details, and it's a great community in that way, and it's just this never ending journey of trying to get better.
Why wasn't that high school walk of shame back to your car with the cramped forearms the last time you did it? It sounds like it's the first time you've been bad at something in a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, so I just couldn't leave it at that. I couldn't leave it that way. I was like, I'm not going out like this. We gotta get back on the grind here and right this injustice.
Now, how many years ago was that? How long is this? Like, this seems to, the way you're describing it, it seems to be a solution to the problem that all your previous endeavors had as far as having a shelf life, like using the word like sort of endless and limitless opportunities, like, even comparing it to something like powerlifting, where, the one of the things you'll hear from the greatest who ever do it is like, yeah, I don't know, it's kind of pretty simple at the end of the day. Like, there is a finite, do you foresee this now as something you're going to do forever?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as a competitor, no. So I started jiu-jitsu September 2017. This story about losing those matches would have been February 2018. 2019, I podiumed at Pan Am's and Worlds, third at both Pan Am's and Worlds at blue belt. Was in, I was 280, which is the lightest I'd been since I was like 17 years old. And then in late 2019, I started getting insane sciatica, like drop foot stuff, a bunch of all kind of nerve damage, like atrophy through my right calf. Deal with that, a couple of epidurals, come back, compete again, and against Nsima Inyang in like the super fight thing for flow grappling, which would have been February 2020. So I was a blue belt. He had become a purple belt then. So we had a match. He beats me at that, and that I rupture the tendon. So I had back-to-back weeks. This pinky, that's as straight as that goes. The week before our match, I rupture the tendon and dislocate both joints in this pinky. And then in our match, I probably against like his iron steel pecs, I rupture the tendon in this thumb. And if we can see a good scar there, no, I can't figure out which way to turn my hand for the camera. Anyways, there's a big scar there. So I have to get surgery on that. I get surgery on that like the day before the world shuts down for COVID. And then coming back, I was like, everything was closed. I had two hands that didn't work. All my buddies, who are normally lawyers or whatever, they're like, well, we're off work, so like, let's drink a bunch of beers all day. Awesome. The grocery store will only sell you two pieces of meat, so I better get this tri-tip or this brisket or something, so we don't go hungry. So get out of shape and stuff, and then come back, start training jiu-jitsu again as things open back up. And then the back stuff goes fucking nuclear towards late 2020, from New Year's Eve 2020 till a surgery 2.5 weeks later. I was like bedridden, maybe could stand for 2 or 3 minutes before I had a microdiscectomy surgery that my surgeon described as his personal record for the most disc material he had ever removed from someone. About a 42 millimeter long by 9 millimeter thick piece. But went from like not being able to stand for 2-3 minutes at a time to walk right out of that surgery center and get back. Got pretty strong. I mean, I squatted over 700 post back surgery, and but some I did Masters Worlds at Jiu-Jitsu last year and got second there because I'm an idiot and was like, hey, how did I try this move that I practiced once, but in the finals of this world tournament, and fucked it up shockingly. But it's kind of like my body is fucked up from a lifetime of pushing it to the limit. And could I train really hard at jiu-jitsu and be as good as I could, be as good as I can at that? Yeah. Would it cost me all the other physical things that I like to do, like play golf or exist without being sore all the time? Yes. So, like I said, hobbyist, fun to do, fun to learn new stuff, meet new people through that. But just kind of doing it to do it.
I love the mindset of going for like the YOLO finisher move, and you questioning that. Like, that hasn't been the theme of the entire podcast so far. So 5 days? Oh, you say it's in 5 days. Do you know how bad that story ends for a mortal? Like, if I'm just like, oh, Ontario's strongest man, 5 days. Okay. You just skip to the microdiscectomy. Like, you just skip all of the successful shit and just go right to me in a hospital bed.
The simplest advice for anyone in strongman to succeed is to be a strong man. That I already was. What
prerequisite?
What shape the thing I had to pick up was less of a concern. But I was like, well, I'm big and strong, and I've been good at a bunch of sports, so why can't I pick up this weird thing?
I'm curious on the transition of healthy to injured and back, as that's, there's a subset of athletes who do handle that transition well. It's not very small, and you're one of them, of like non-athlete or athlete to non-athlete, regardless of how the sport gets taken away from them. But to someone who's set very specific goals for not having a surgery during or going through a sport that has its known risks. Like, I know 2 people last month that have done bilateral quad tendon ruptures, and it's like you escape unscathed. You run the gauntlet in Sperry's through the powerlifting. What was that like then, having to like kind of take a metaphorical and physical knee? Like, how did you handle that? Was it difficult at all? Or is it just like, I don't know, the software engineer kind of just like took care of that too? Did Tim take care of that too? Like,
No. I mean, with the back stuff, when it was really, really bad there at the end, like, before it was like, okay, feel a little off, take a day or two off of jiu-jitsu, do them fucking bird dogs or whatever, and then, all right, feel good enough, and go back and do it again. But once I got to the point where it's like, am I dying right now? Like, what is happening? Is my leg like literally on fire? So once I got the surgery, everything then was just such a relief, and it was like, I'm going to take the long road on the recovery. My main goal coming back was not, I need to be able to squat 700 again or even do jiu-jitsu again. It was like, I want to be able to swing a golf club again and live pain-free. But Marissa had begun working with a physical therapist out of Australia named Pei Bokenfuso, who's the 52 kilo lifter for Australia and the IPF, and working through her own sciatica issues and stuff. And Pei had helped her out a ton. So, because Pei and I would communicate more about Marissa's training and like, all right, what's she ready to do? And as we're getting ready for, worlds or, nationals or worlds or whatever powerlifting meet for her. And Pei sort of like, she's like, do you want to like lift heavy again? And I was like, not, doesn't really matter. Like, I've done that. Like, check that box, ran that gauntlet. I won. I did powerlifting, like, as about as done as it could be. And then she's sort of like, yeah, because it wouldn't be that hard, to get you back doing that stuff. And I was sort of like, okay, wouldn't be that hard. Well, shit, I guess let's try then. And so she helped me out, and then we were sponsoring that garage gym competition, as we have for a couple years now. And I was like, I should do this myself. And, like, I have this powerlifting app, but I don't do powerlifting anymore, and really haven't done powerlifting since the app was a thing. So I'm training for jiu-jitsu stuff or whatever. I was like, all right, let's put your money where your mouth is here and create the program, set the date, do it, and went and did squatted 320 kilos there, which I hadn't. So that was in late 2022. I hadn't squatted more than 550 since mid 2019, so over 3 years at that point. I probably hadn't squatted more than 315 in 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that. So, got it back going good enough. And people were like, "Whoa, 700, that's awesome." I was like, "Well, I probably could have done this for like 17 reps when I was in my best shape." So, like I'm not impressed with it, but it's all relative.
What was that process like in going from someone who programs for everyone to having a 56 kilo woman on the other side of the world going like, all right, here's the game plan. Like you're the guy that literally everyone goes to. Like like I saw that one, you were going back and forth with Blaine McConnell, the guy who defies gravity. And now all of a sudden you're on the receiving end of a program going like, are you serious? Like how did that work for you?
Yeah. So Blaine, along with Kyle Wilcox, our developer, I did his training for bobsled for like 4 or 5 years. But on the physical therapy side of stuff, I'd always had people that I worked with and relied on there. Dr. Quinn Hennock, a long relationship with 3 different sports diplomate chiros who work for either the Chula Vista Olympic Training Center, Salt Lake City Olympic Training Center, guys who 2 of them had their first office of their first practice was out of original Juggernaut Gym back in 2009. So I'd always had people I relied on for that. So it wasn't, any strange difference there. And it's also always a really helpful thing to me to better understand, regressions, progressions, like, graded exposure type of stuff and how to get back to that. Because I think people know me as a powerlifting coach, but I'm a sport performance coach. It's just that the sport I've dealt with the most is powerlifting, but track and field, bobsled, football, basketball, baseball, whatever. Coaching high school football now, do a lot of the return to play type of things there. So there's understanding like how we can create this progression. And for the back pain stuff specifically, it was a big shift in the way that I thought about things because Pei has 2 big populations she works with, powerlifting and diving. And she's like, both of the groups are overly specific in their training, powerlifting to, lumbar extension, hip external rotation, and anti-rotation in the trunk. And diving is the opposite. They have a ton of flexion, ton of internal rotation, and they're rotating all over the place. So she's like, I kind of end up giving the powerlifters diving stuff and the divers powerlifting stuff because they got to have some capacity to the other side of things. Because she had been having Marissa do this rehab stuff that were like, Jefferson curl type of things, where it's just like, all right, what is a Jefferson curl in the simplest, like through the powerlifter's eyes? It's like, that's just the shittiest looking deadlift that you could do. Or she was doing these like internal rotation bias, lumbar flexion, like goblet squats. So his knees knocked in, hips tucked under, like butt winked goblet squats. And she was feeling better from doing those. She's like, so I was like, you're doing the ugliest looking squats and the ugliest looking deadlifts and it's making your squat and deadlift feel better? Like, how the fuck does that happen? But it sort of created this shift in the way that I thought about, our need to develop capacity to the other side of what our sports demand is. That when you spent a decade or whatever just doing these things. So I never thought when I started powerlifting, I never thought about, oh, this is going to hurt, that going to hurt, because I was an athlete. I was a real athlete. Like I was
you could say it. You could say it.
I said it. Yeah. I was coming from sprinting and jumping and spinning and twisting and doing everything. So I wasn't, I could move in every way. I wasn't restricted in anything. So I didn't think about that. And over time, as I became more and more specific, and a lot of that came about because I still did a lot more general training pre the first bout of disc herniation issues in 2013. But when I came back from that, I just never really wanted to take the time to do like the capacity work to like, all right, I'm going to get back to doing box jumps because I'm afraid to do them because of the impact on my spine. So I need to start out, at this 18-inch box. I'm going to build up to doing 10 sets of 5. And I was like, this is fucking boring. So I'm just not going to do that. I'll just squat a bunch instead. But I lost a lot of that capacity and those general movement patterns. And it was definitely problematic to me that the training became too specific or that I didn't have dedicated periods of more general training.
When you kind of had that light bulb moment of like variability of like, oh, Pay's actually just having her do the opposite, the bizarro world powerlifting training. Up until that point, you've done, performance coaching for across, as many sports as one can think of. How is your philosophy for coaching changed? Obviously that was like an inflection point, probably one of many. Now, as I think you're one of the very unique ones who maybe established a name in powerlifting, but that wasn't necessarily your bread and butter as far as powerlifting coaching goes, at the very least. Like, how has your philosophies changed? What has been the biggest, like, man, I can't believe I used to think that, now I think this? Like, when you look back, what's the most different about either the way you approach your own training, if you could go back and do it again, or how you approach different sports? Like, what's been the big like delta for you?
Yeah, I mean, part of it would be I used to be like obsessed with West Side, and people on the internet may know like I'm not a huge fan now, but so I think 38-year-old Chad, he would, if 22-year-old Chad knew what he did now, I'd be like, that fucking pussy. But I've been fortunate because of this wide range of sports I've been involved with personally and from a coaching standpoint to get exposure to a lot of different coaches and a lot of different ideas, and did, I think, a pretty good job of going into most of those encounters with an open mind and understanding that being a powerlifting coach doesn't mean I just talk to powerlifters and powerlifting coaches, but that physical therapists had something to offer, and I, shot put discus coaches and football strength coaches and bodybuilders and weightlifters, and seeing the principles that were making all of these people successful. And like, for scientific principles of strength training, like if specificity creates the framework in which all of their decisions are made, being able to contextualize, all right, this is what specificity, this is what it means for this sport, for this sport, for this sport. And I think not enough people get involved in things outside of their echo chamber, their specific, like maybe even just like their echo chamber within powerlifting, let alone, coaches from totally different sports. So I think, I've just been very fortunate to get a lot of varied exposure there and take advantage of it.
So, I mean, in the interest of the theme of the conversation of transitions and kind of dovetailing off this idea of various levels of exposure from various influences, off the jump, I heard Bill Belichick the other day being called the Chad Wesley Smith of coaching in the NFL. You have now since recently taken up it was so interesting to me because I've seen the flag football and the high school football.
Mm.
You in your coaching career have always been, I'm assuming, sought after for people who respect and know that you know more than them when it comes to specific training, or have the ability, the skill set, or the resourcefulness to solve their problems. I would assume that the flag football kids and the high school football kids, and I could correct me if I'm wrong, have no idea, some of them, what you have accomplished. And maybe some of them, I'll go as far to say, don't care.
Well, the flag football kids, they don't care for sure, because that's just Uncle Chad, or this is my dad's friend who comes over and drinks beers all the time. Like we don't have to listen to him. So the flag football coaching is whatever. Though we run a pretty tight ship. We have a very extensive playbook for a bunch of 7 and 8-year-olds. The high school coaching one though is been tricky because when I coached high school football before I started Juggernaut, so in 2006, 7, and 8, but that was at the high school that I went to. And yeah, my first year coaching, when those guys were freshmen, when I was a senior. So I was like, probably more like, oh my God, it's Chad than I was ever in any powerlifting community to people. Because when you're a freshman in high school and you look at the senior and high school football players, you're like, this is a Herculean man here. And I was close enough in age to them where like, he might hit me if I get out of line. And I was like, fucking right, I will. I'll operate outside the system here. I don't need this job. So with the high school stuff now, the creating like buy-in and whatever is kind of an interesting thing. And it does help that I, like work with NFL players, and I have a long relationship now with the 49ers. So like we had a morning a couple weeks ago where Fred Warner, all pro linebacker for the 49ers, was down here in Newport Beach, and we worked out at the school that day. So, and I'd only been working at that high school for maybe 6 weeks or if that. So, but for those kids to be like, well, if Fred Warner listens to him, I guess we should too. But our head coach, Kevin Heddig, he, cause the high school coaching stuff is a volunteer job for me, but all the sport performance coaching I do now is on a volunteer basis. The app is very comfortable living for me. So, I do strength and conditioning for some professional MMA fighters and a couple football players when they're around in the off season. And that's all like, I'm doing this for free, guys, because I want to help you. And I like you guys, and you're part of our jiu-jitsu community and at our school and stuff. And if you want to give me some money after you fight, awesome. If cash is tight as it is for many up and coming MMA fighters, don't worry about it. I'm doing this because I enjoy it. And I'm doing the coaching at the high school because I'm passionate about it, and I enjoy particularly working with that age group because you can be so impactful on their development as athletes and people. And our head coach said he got asked by the athletic director, like, why is this guy doing this for free? And he's here like 5-6 hours a day. And the description he gave, he meant as a compliment, though, because I'm trying to create this like top down structure for bottom up development, and it's a junior high and high school all attached. So I was like, we got to get in there with the junior high kids, and we're going to get them going and do this and this overarching training like system for it. And he says to the athletic director, he's kind of like Lenin or Stalin. They have this idea about how a political system can work, and they wanted to implement it. And like, he's got this. And I was like, I don't know if I love that, but well, it's fun because I'm not a yeller. I'm like really relaxed and not soft spoken by any means, but I'm not like a rah in your face intense guy. So he wasn't saying it from that. I think he was saying it more from he has a philosophical mission that he wants to accomplish in it. And I would say that is fair, though the people that he chose to compare me to, it could have been better.
If you like 3 more names and you're at Hitler, like, sorry, that's like, do you just walk into the first day and go, okay, to each according to his abilities, to each according to his means? Like, how deep down the rabbit hole? Or because the interesting thing is, you mentioned that you studied history, so I'm like, I'm assuming that this carries more weight in your mind than it does in his. This is like an off the cuff, like, oh yeah,
My title now is, well, and he's a history teacher at the school, but my title now is not head strength and conditioning coach or director of strength and conditioning, is chairman of strength and conditioning. So
was czar of strength and conditioning off the table?
Just Chairman Smith.
That's going to look really well on the LinkedIn page.
Yeah.
So outside of the volunteer endeavors, outside of the app, outside of jiu-jitsu, do you have man, like I'm trying to do like one thing half decent for the last like 15 years. And I feel like your brain is just like an old painted fence that you're just like picking paint chips off of. You're like, what's this one? I'm going to pick up. What is the next paint chip in your brain that you're picking off and be like, all right, this will be interesting for the next decade?
I mean, I'll tell you, the football coaching thing is probably a pretty big undertaking for me. Like, I'm really into it. Marissa is probably already sick of it. I think she was like, "God, flag football was bad enough with 7-year-olds, and you're losing sleep over it." And I was like, "Well, now it's all the time." So, uh, that stuff. Like I said, I love that because I think you can be so impactful in their development. And I look at something like, if you're familiar with De La Salle High School, a high school in Northern California that went undefeated for 12 years, 151 straight game winning streak, and did it kind of with these smaller, seemingly lesser athletes, but through an incredible training and team culture. So that's going to be, I think, a big undertaking for me, trying to, get the handicap down on the golf course and then just enjoy time, with the people I love around here. So
Perspective from a powerlifter is always so weird because I'm like, he looks just like one, but he doesn't sound like one. It's so strange.
yeah, I've gotten that a few times, and I always take it as a compliment. So
as it's meant, Sir Stalin, or whatever the fuck the last compliment was.
Chairman Smith.
Chairman, right? Yeah, my apologies. Well, man, we'll have to do this again after you make the PGA Tour and they make a movie about your high school football team.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Thanks for having me on, man.
No, I appreciate you taking the time, man. It means a lot. Good luck with everything.